Dog-eared the hell out of that thing, huh? Dog-eared the heck out of that.
Good evening. Tonight we'll call to order City Council meeting for the City of Gahanna. Tonight is Monday, November 4th, 2024. If we would please all rise for invocation and pledge of allegiance led by Vice President Trenton Weaver.
Thank you. As we gather, we are reminded that we are all interconnected, each of us meriting respect and care. Let us be mindful of the interwoven nature of all things and of the brevity of life. Let us treat everyone as our friend, letting go of our fear, our anger, our prejudice, and intolerance. And let us find that beauty is everywhere. And let us be at peace with ourselves and at peace with the world. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Weaver. Mr. Van Meter, would you please call the roll?
Bowers.
Here.
Jones.
Here.
McGregor.
Here.
Padova.
Here.
Renner.
Here.
Schnetzer.
Here.
Weaver.
Here.
Thank you. Are there any additions or corrections to the agenda tonight? All right, hearing none. We'll move on to hearing of visitors. Mr. Clerk, are there any speaker slips this evening?
None.
All right. Seeing no one here for hearing of visitors, we'll move on to Section D, presentations. We have one item this evening. Thank you to Director Farrell for joining us to give an update on the street tree program.
Good evening, and you should see some familiar faces that are going to join me this evening. We have the Forestry Supervisor, Julie Praderi, and then the Parks and Facilities Superintendent, Zach Guthrie, as well. So the Street Tree Program is a program that has resulted in a significant amount of time and effort, in large part by our City Forester, Julie Praderi. So we want to take the opportunity to present to you what the progress has been, and then what we intend for the future. We will present multiple slides, and obviously if any questions, if we're able to hold through the presentation, that would be helpful. So the program development, this slide represents the staffing model of the forestry division. The blue is the current staff, and then the yellow is the requested for the 2025 year. The presentation on the right side of the slide is the qualifications and certifications that our staff hold. This just really represents the expertise and the amount of skill that our staff have. They often, actually, both the forestry foreman as well as the supervisor have been sought out to speak at conferences and are really sought after from the level of expertise that they have. This represents, there we go. The green and the yellow here, this really helps to diversify the functions of the forestry division. We have the park and general operations and then the street tree operations. Of course, the forestry team is one team, but with the amount of time and effort that the street tree program will require, this really just helps to show and diversify what those responsibilities will be moving forward. So under park general operations, the horticulture team are a part of this division. So this is everything from planting and pruning, as well as increasing our prairies, managing those prairies, reviewing development plans with any type of new development that comes into the city, as well as emergency response. So this is not an all-inclusive list of the skills and requirements of this division, but just a brief overview of the type of work that's being done. And again, recalling the previous slide, this is done by a very small team. So the amount of work and responsibility for the team of a very small but skilled is impressive. The remainder of this presentation will focus on the street tree operation, but in essence, we have been able to move forward with some of the removals of any type of hazard trees, as well as we've been able to present some plantings. Again, we'll go over that in more detail as we move forward. So the way that this program was developed, back in 2018, we were able to bring on a very skilled individual in the forestry field. Julie had representation or skill from different municipalities. So taking that experience into the city of Gahanna to identify some opportunities moving forward. And it was clear that a street tree program is something that we were lacking. So started to progress what are some of the services that we need in order to introduce a program to the city. Through 2019, there were some challenges financially, so that halted any type of progress with the program in itself. The 2020-2021 year was a lot of time to gain research. A survey was submitted to local municipalities to understand what type of work and programs existed, and then truly understand what made sense for the city of Gahanna. So the participation from the survey is outlined with these agencies on the screen. So clearly a lot of participation and a lot of diversified content in response to the types of programs that each municipality were able to perform. So with that evaluation, there were 3 agencies who truly modeled the type of program that made sense for the city of Gahanna. So the progress from that content was able to move forward from these 3 agencies. So from here, I'm going to hand it over to Zach to really talk about the program in itself and just some more details around the street tree program.
Good evening. Make sure everybody hear me? Yeah. All right, so I'll pick up from where Stephanie was talking about how the program was being evaluated, being built. So Julie consulted with the organizations throughout Central Ohio, and something really became inherent from what she gained, the feedback she gained from other municipalities, the cities that she really looked at, those 3 that Stephanie referenced, that Gahanna's street trees were well behind the times. So in the 80s to the early 2000s, trees monocultures were planted, so single species were planted in certain areas. What we were determined to be not really appropriate trees to be planted in small tree lawns. Disease, other factors have played into the lack of canopy and really the decline of the canopy throughout the city. So it became really obvious that we were in need of a formal program that was ran by the city. We were one of the few cities in Central Ohio that did not have a dedicated street tree program. So with that, Julie then began to develop and build the plan that we were going to put forward to propose to introduce that program to the city. So in 2021, I want actually, before I move on the slide, I want to talk about 2 pictures we have up there that kind of really showcase that a couple of reasons why our canopy was declining. So the tree, the maple on Crossing Creek, that tree currently exists now. It's a diseased tree. There's the same species of tree are planted within that section of town. So that's an example of a dying tree that really is need of removal. And ultimately, we are planning to look at removing that tree within the next 3 to 6 months. The one on Westerdale, recently removed, that was a situation where we had at least 3 call-ins in evenings, weekends, where we had large limbs that had fallen into the right-of-way, roadway, sidewalk, and the trees in that area, because of the number of call-ins and regular incidents with that type of tree. It's a calorie pear. You can see in the middle that there's a section that's damaged. There's like a little slat in the middle of that tree. That's from one of those limbs that had fallen in the middle of the night during the windstorm, where the tree tries to heal itself, but the wound is so deep that the inside of the tree, that's a challenge with the pear trees, is that they become, as they grow, the limbs become very large. The trunk of the tree cannot support the weight of the limbs. And when you introduce disease, ultimately from the limb that had been fallen off of it, it adds to the decay of that tree. So sometimes the pear trees, you can't see from the outside how hazardous those trees potentially are. So that's just one neighborhood in Gahanna that we've had that issue with. There's unfortunately, a number of neighborhoods in our community that have similar issues with the pear trees on those neighborhood streets. So we'll move on to the next slide. So in 2021, Julie and I presented her plan to Director Farrell. Within that plan, ultimately, the ultimate goal was for us to improve and increase the tree canopy in Gahanna. We love trees and parks. Forestry is part of parks. We want to add as many trees as we can. Unfortunately, there are situations where trees have become hazardous, as it outlined with the pear and the maple there, that we do have to remove trees in order to move forward and ultimately goal to improve our canopy. At the end of the day, that's what we're working to do. Also, because of the years of the trees not being maintained by the city, by residents, you have lack of pruning, lack of maintenance on the trees. When you don't prune a tree properly, it doesn't grow, as well as it's not formed correctly. So that's when you have limbs growing in areas where they shouldn't be, and ultimately the health of the tree is less because it's not cared for properly. So main point of the goal is improving the canopy. We would transition the ownership of the trees from private ownership to ultimately maintained and owned by the city. Number one, we want to take care of the hazards. So in introducing the plan, hazard and the concern for people and property is number one. We also, as I stated, improve the maintenance of the tree. So planting a tree now that's maybe 1.5 or 2 inch size tree, from when it's planted in the next 5 to 10 years is really important to have a proper pruning program, so that ultimately 10, 20, 30 years down the road, that tree is healthier. Mulching, watering, so in times of drought or lack of water, those younger trees are getting everything they need to grow and flourish. And then at the very end, and which we've fortunately been able to do some, is plant new trees. So get trees back into areas where trees have been removed, where we have tree equity, where there's lack of canopy in neighborhoods. We want to try to introduce those. So at the end goal is to improve the canopy ultimately and have trees in our tree lawns in the future. So this is the 3 main phases that were introduced to council in 2022. When this was initiated in 2021, the idea was this would be about a 5-year plan, phased over 3 different kind of periods. So the first would be number one, hazards, making sure people are safe. So that would be removing those that are in decline because of health reasons, also structural defects, and also because of pests. Also part of phase 1 would be to review code, hire a forestry supervisor, and add additional staff, a maintenance worker 2, which is a coordinated level in our full-time level staff, with the request of $120,000. Phase 2, introducing stump grinding in-house, pruning, code changes again, education, introducing more staff, adding some more equipment, more seasonal staff, and increased budget. Phase 3, and mind you, this was our initial approach, and we've had to amend this. I'll talk to that in a minute. Replacements, code changes, community education, more staff, and an increased budget. So now we're get into 2023. So going into 2023, we had the unfortunate situation of ash trees in several areas of our town were becoming hazards. We had limbs, full trees falling into the roadway. We did ask for a supplemental appropriation, which fortunately we were provided mid-year in 2023. And even before that, we started to introduce more staff, more equipment. Internally, we were able to do a little more because of the funding that we'd received and support that we were receiving. But in 2023, at that time, we did not have a dedicated amount to street trees. Mid-year 2023, we were appropriated funds to remove the hazards, which were as a result of the emerald ash borer, which removed all the remaining ash trees in the city. We were a lot of money as well to do replacements. So the replacements were completing this fall. We had to wait a little bit because of the drought to get all those in, but they're in process and planned within the next month that will all be completed. And then in 2024, this year, we were, as part of our appropriation with our operational budget, there are funds that are fully intended and have been used for our street trees. So that's removals, that's additional plantings, that's other maintenance stump grinding that we've used this year. And I'll pass it off to Julie. Thank you.
Great. Okay, we're going to get into now what are we doing with the street tree program right now. So this slide kind of goes over our main functions with the street tree program. We're currently doing tree removals, tree pruning, tree planting, and stump grinding. And you might notice that a lot of these services are new in 2024. So with tree removals, we focus on public safety, as Zach already mentioned. We do hazard removals that are identified by staff, and then also hazard removals that are by request, but we do go out and verify that they do meet our standards for removal. We just recently got to the point where we started feeling like we could handle pear removal by request, and approximately 50% of the removals we do in-house and 50% are contracted. With tree pruning, this is really where we have a lot of room to grow still. We're really doing just safety-related pruning, so no clearance pruning yet, but just things related to stop signs, bus stops, traffic lights, that kind of thing. And approximately 90% of that is in-house, only 10% estimated contracted. We have started tree planting. This tree planting is strictly replacement, so this is following city-initiated removal, so sidewalk maintenance program, and then also park-initiated removal. So we do give people the opportunity to opt in for a new tree the year following the removal of a tree in front of their home. Approximately 5% in-house, 95% contracted. And then we did get a stump grinder for the first time this year. So every tree that gets removed, the stump is ground. The city covers the cost of the stump grinding and the hauling away of the chips, whether that's done in-house or contracted. And then the property owner is responsible for turf remediation. And then that, with removals, like removals, that's 50-50 in-house and contracted. The question comes up often on how we prioritize the operations and funding that we have. And while we do put some resources into stump grinding, pruning, and other tree care, really the two big buckets are removals and planting. So the planting's pretty straightforward. I just went over that. That's an opt-in replacement program. We coordinate with HOAs if that's a factor. But like I said, residents must opt in for that program. The hazard tree removal, that's definitely safety oriented. So we're focusing on areas that either we're aware of because we've been called in, there's been an emergency, a history of failure. We know calorie pears are prone to splitting, and so we tend to focus on those areas as well. But before we remove any tree, it is inspected by an ISA certified arborist and a tree risk assessment qualified professional prior to removal. Sometimes two, if not more, two or more ISA certified arborists will inspect those trees before we determine that they need to come down. The tough thing about hazard removals is that they do tend to be clustered in areas, as Zach went over. Monocultures, which is that one tree per street, was a very popular approach to street trees historically, and we have learned our lesson with that. So you tend to see trees hit maturity at the same time, or trees have issues, and you see those all come across at the same time. Or if there's a disease, you're losing whole streets and neighborhoods at once. We definitely understand how impactful that is, but it doesn't change the fact that you still kind of see those happen in clusters. So that's why you sometimes see these mass removals happening. It's not because we want to clear cut. I will say the plus side to having that happen sometimes is it does give you kind of a clean slate for replanting. We do have code requirements that have specific spacing between trees, so when you don't have any trees and you can kind of start fresh, you oftentimes can get more trees than if you're popping them in between trees that are already existing. So that's the long-winded answer of how we prioritize where we're focusing on. Communications with residents also comes up quite often. Our goal is to never have somebody have a tree come down in front of their house without them having been notified. And letters are really the primary way that we try to reach people. In a lot of cases, we do letters that are sent through the mail, and then we also do a door hanger on the front door. Those go to like impacted property owners. So if they have a tree at their address that's coming down, they get that letter. We've also answered lots of phone calls. The emails are really great for the tree replacement program. Since it is opt-in, people are able to give their email and phone number so I can reach them easier. If there's updates of, hey, it's going to be next week, I can reach out and let people know. We've attended HOA meetings, and then we have published some street tree FAQs in city publications. But always looking for new opportunities. I know communication can never be good enough, so always looking for new ways to reach people. One of the things that I think is confusing sometimes is that there are tree projects that happen outside of Parks and Recreation. So these are 3 examples of projects that do happen. Not that our input isn't given, but these are managed outside of our department. So sidewalk maintenance program is a big example of that. Clearing for new and existing utilities, and then clearing for development of private property. Not in all cases, but in some cases, we do have the opportunity to give comment, but they are managed outside of our department. Just talking about some challenges that we face with the program, we have put a lot of thought into trying to do this the right way, talking to different municipalities to figure out what their mistakes were so that hopefully we don't have to make the same ones, but there's always going to be things that we come across that are challenging. Sidewalk tree conflict is certainly a big one. I think people just misunderstanding either what's happening or what our goals are, what we're trying to do is something else that we've come across that's been very challenging. We're working through code changes to reflect some of the changes in operation that we're trying to accomplish. And as I talked about in the last slide, always communication, figuring out how to talk to people and educate. And then tree planting is a challenge just in the way of, I think I was just talking about how emotional trees are for people sometimes, and there's a lot of history with people feeling very strongly one way or the other. So getting people kind of on board with why they should want a tree and getting those back in the ground. So what to expect coming up? Unfortunately, we still are going to see some hazard removals happening, and the reason for that is what we've been talking about this whole time is really when you are taking a tree program from infancy or from deferred maintenance into what we want it to be, we have to start with making it safe first and getting our hands around what we have. So plan to continue to see that. We are asking for money in the budget for an urban forestry management plan and an inventory in 2025, as well as we're planning to do a pear management and outreach plan in 2025 as well. That would be in-house. And those are both opportunities just to have more data and research to back up what we're doing, to identify places where we can plant and prioritizing those removals. And then another just opportunity for outreach. We're still working on code revisions. We're continuing to plant replacement street trees, and you'll see that continue and hopefully expand. And then in the long term, we want to see citywide tree planting, structural pruning, and plant healthcare be part of our program. So just to wrap up and bring it back, again, the goal for this whole program is to improve and increase tree canopy in Gahanna. And we plan to do this by offering expanded tree services, collaborating with other departments on tree-related projects, and improving outreach and education. By working towards this goal, we are also aligning with the goal for a more sustainable Gahanna. And that concludes our presentation tonight, and open for questions.
Thank you, all 3 of you, so much, and welcome back, Forrester Praderi. We're glad to see you back. Let me start with one broader question, just for the benefit of folks who might be watching and just to help make sure that we're clear about why we care about the tree canopy. Could you maybe articulate why, what are the benefits of street trees and a healthy tree canopy for our community?
Okay, yeah, I'll take this one. I think as many people do know, trees are an asset, a resource that we really have the opportunity to manage. They increase the value of homes, they provide shade, they slow traffic, they beautify, they give lots of environmental benefits. People really are evolved to be most at ease around trees, and I think, maybe you don't notice it when you're out, just being, but really it makes a huge difference whether you have a canopy or not, and just how you feel about the neighborhood that you live in. So I don't know if you guys have anything to add.
Excellent, thank you. Questions from my colleagues? Yes, Mr. Weaver.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you all for being here. So just real quick to pick up on that last comment, we were fortunate last week to have Jeff Speck here joining us. He was also at the MORPC Summit on Sustainability, and to your last comment, one of the things he emphasized is that humans by nature need to be comfortable on if we're walking or biking, to help encourage us not to use a car maybe. And one of the things that he did highlight just to help with that comfort is by having trees on our journey, or public art, just various things that we can do that basically can let our minds know that we're comfortable. So I appreciate that comment. I did have a question as it related to the hazard trees. I guess very broadly, where are we on, I guess, in the timeline of addressing the hazard trees? Or is the goal to do X many a year, or is it it might not be hazardous this year, but next year we'll reevaluate? I'm just not sure how that process works and where we are.
Yeah. So the Urban Forestry Master Plan, or Management Plan, that we're planning and hoping to do in 2025 will help us answer that question with better data to back up our answer. Just from being out in the field and kind of seeing it, I will say we have a lot of mature pears that are still out there. Not saying that we have any plans for that right this second, and as I mentioned, we do plan to have a pear-specific management plan that comes out next year as well on how we're going to handle that moving forward. But for this year specifically, in this fall, we are looking for trees that are dead or in poor condition. So we actually have our tree risk assessment qualified professional in the room with us. Sorry, Cody, I'm giving you a shout out. But he's been through the training, so he knows what to look for. And then, I've been working in the field for a while too, so I don't have that same training that Cody does, but the two of us look at these trees together often, and we're trying to choose the ones that are in the worst condition right now. So I can't give you that number of like, we're this percentage of the way through, but I'll tell you that there is still more to go, and we're hoping to have that data next year.
That's very helpful. That's what I was trying to figure out. Since I'm thrilled to see a street tree program moving forward. This is something that I've been advocating for since I was elected. I heard about it when I was first campaigning, and to that point, I will say, in my neck of the woods, in Ward 4, we do have a lot of pears, especially the Riva Ridge area, and I distinctly remember I was out knocking doors for my own campaign, and I was talking with a resident, and lo and behold, right behind us, a pear split in half and nearly took out 2 children who were playing in the driveway. So they are hazardous trees, so I appreciate the attention that's being paid to them. I'm just thrilled that the project's moving forward, so thank you.
Yes, Ms. Padova?
Thank you so much for kind of catching us up on everything that's happening with the street tree program. I did have a question. You said that when you guys don't do the removal of the trees when it's part of the sidewalk program, those are removed. But does it then come back around and get on your list for replacement, or are those just removed? And
Yeah, they have the ability to opt in following
Okay.
the sidewalk replacement program. So we've been working with engineering to make sure that we have those lists of where those trees did come down as part of the sidewalk maintenance program. And then the following year, those residents will have that opportunity. They get a letter right to their mailbox that says, you have the opportunity to opt into this program. And like I said earlier, we're looking for more ways to reach people to try to get those numbers up a little bit. But yes, they do have the opportunity to get new trees.
thank you. And it sounded like the timeline from when you remove one to replacing it is roughly like the year after? Is that, did I?
Yes, that's
hear that?
currently what we're
Okay.
doing. We've only been doing replacements since last year, so I'm hoping we can get faster at it, but just the management of, we go out and physically like measure with a measuring wheel to make sure that they're compliant with code. We're marking curves, we're talking to residents, we're sending communications. All of that takes time, and then we have to get with our contractor to make sure everything's set with them too. So my hope is that we can get faster at it, but it does take some time to get through all of that.
The first round of plantings were spring of this year. So it
Okay.
took us the removals of the ash in 23. It wasn't until spring of 24 the trees went in the ground. So it takes some time to organize, but that work started in fall of 23 to do that planting. So it takes 6 months to plan, to plant. So 6 to 9 months from when, from initially identifying where those trees are going and getting them in the ground. So that's why
Okay.
we say a year. It takes a bit of time to be able to get everything organized, communication, orders, quotes, all those things. It takes,
Okay.
Julie and her team do a great job of planning these things out.
And then one other question, if people don't have any trees in front of their property, what is the process for, can people plant them themselves? Do they have, I believe they have to get a permit and there's only certain ones that you can do. Is that correct?
At this point, yes. The hope with this project moving forward is that we'll be able to introduce street trees to those folks who want them, that don't have them. We're not requiring them at this point in time, so it is an opt-in. There may be some folks who don't want the street tree, and we're not going to force that. However, those who do want, they'll be able to introduce a tree into their tree lawn.
And outside of the programs, a resident can plant in the tree lawn currently. They do have to complete a right-of-way permit, which is reviewed by Julie, that it is the appropriate tree to be planted in that location. And once that's approved, then a resident they can out with their own dollars, they are permitted to plant trees currently outside of the programs that we offer.
And then if they do that, they're responsible for maintaining it as well. You
Current
guys
code-
wouldn't do that,
Current
correct?
code requires that, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, just checking. Thank you.
Can I, just one quick follow-up question to the sidewalk plan, and then I'll turn over to Mr. Renner. For when you've identified that you can perhaps maybe remove some roots to help identify or to help resolve issues with the sidewalk panels, who is doing that? Or am I fabricating this and this doesn't actually happen?
Yeah, I can speak to that. So sorry, I'm not used to this.
You're doing great.
Thank you. The engineering department in their contract has an arborist on staff that does all of that. I will say that I was able to give some input into how those roots should be evaluated early in the process. And roots are a hard thing. It's not very cut and dry, and other municipalities struggle with it as well, to be totally honest. There's always some risk associated in cutting roots, and trying to figure out, whether or not the tree can be saved. It's a difficult thing, but we try to put some parameters in place that if there are trees that can be saved, that there is an effort made to do that. Now with pears specifically, those come down no matter what, if roots are being cut, because of the other issues associated with them. And but in most cases, if it's a tree that we want to see in the tree line, we have asked that arborist to try to make that call to save trees that have the potential to be saved. It's just, in a lot of cases that we've come across so far, either they've been pears or they've been honey locust trees that tend to have really heavy surface rooting problems. So, sorry, maybe too much information on that answer, but.
Great, thank you. Mr. Renner?
Yeah, thank you. So a couple of comments first. I want to thank you deeply for the effort that you're growing, no pun intended, a tree program. I know that it's hard to take care of. These are living things, and so it's hard to actually turn around and actually create a program around that. And then you're actually spending the time to mature it, and so I deeply appreciate that. From a climate action plan, trees have shown considerably, and I want to highlight the shade effect because it protects us from the heat island effects that happen in municipalities. And all one has to do is actually go to Columbus's climate action plan, and where they actually show, and they did a study in August in 2022, I think it was, and they did at 8 o'clock in the morning and at 12 o'clock at midday, and then at 5-ish in the afternoon, and then put that on created a heat map. And so you can see the areas where there was high intensity heat where there are no trees. Through that, interestingly enough, the perimeter of Gahanna you can see it, and you can see the cooling effect that happens around us. So I think it's actually from a long-term point of view, when we start talking about resiliency and adaptation, trees are going to become something that we really want to protect us from the onslaught of the heat. So I have a question that sort of dovetails with that, and I dovetails a little bit with Councilwoman Padova. So in areas where there are no trees, is there work being done to say, hey, we need more trees there, and we need to figure out how to get more trees there?
Because there's still work with the code language in order to take on the responsibility of the street trees and the maintenance of the street trees, because right now it still is the property or the landowner's responsibility. So that work will still progress into early 2025. But as we intend to move forward, the education and the benefits of why street trees are important will be an opportunity for us to introduce when we request if they want to opt into the replacement program. So that is, of course, a component of this program to help folks understand that this isn't, there's many benefits of having a street tree. So the benefits outweigh any type of negative impact that could come along. So absolutely.
Okay, so that's coming, and so good. Thank you.
And currently, if I could add to that too, Julie talks about the Columbus Tree Commission all the time. She is fortunate to serve on that board. So a lot of the knowledge I've learned was from Julie and her knowledge with Columbus heat maps and those. But additional trees, when we have an opportunity to add trees to areas that are in the public right of way, public parks, I know there are areas and parts of Gahanna that are lacking tree equity. The canopy is lacking. So the Sunpoint Park is an example of that. That was a property where within the last 6 years developed that property into a formal park. But as you can see around the perimeter, there's a number of trees that have been planted there. In school properties in the public right of way, there's plantings and not just city-owned property, but school right-of-way as well. So where we have an opportunity where we own the land or have public right-of-way, we do take advantage of those opportunities to add trees, ultimately canopy those spaces where we can in the interim.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the reason why I'm asking this is that, and I'm excited, to see it come next year, is about 25 years ago, we moved into the west side. And in that time, I've watched my neighborhood go from very rich with trees to become almost barren. Part of that is actually because of the ash borer, and I get that, and a lot of people get that. But there is a mess, because people aren't replacing the trees at all. And then, just in the last month, I've had 2 people near me cut down beautiful oak trees in their yard. And so this educational component has got to get out there and help people understand, don't do that. So one was a very beautiful 30-year-old pin oak, and there was nothing at all wrong with it. Anyway, the other thing, and I don't know if you talked about this, but are the trees on Long Stigler? They definitely seem to need help. And I was wondering if there was a program or an idea about that.
I can speak to that. I have noticed these trees as well. These are crab apples that are very prone to disease. They have a number of different diseases that are a problem with them. So far, we've been taking them out as they die. I would not consider those to be in the same, they are trees of concern, like the pears, but they pose a different level of threat, just because of the size difference. Also, they do flower in the spring, so to make a plan to replace those, I think, would be very drastic for people. So we do want to see those kind of come out more in a phased approach. And I don't have a timeline for you on this, but this is just me talking as someone who has noticed this also. But replacing with something similar, there's overhead lines on Stigler that do limit us to what we can put back in. But steering clear of the crab apples. And crab apples are actually on the prohibited list that's voted on by the landscape board. So we're not putting crab apples back in, and that is because they are so prone to disease. But that list is reviewed by the landscape board at minimum every 3 years. So if there's updates that we need to change the species that are on the prohibited list or on the recommended list, we can do that, and that stays flexible.
Do you think next year you'll start attending to them, or I'm fishing for something because it does come up.
Right now, again, because the canopy is in decline and we do have a lot of work that still needs to be done, the trees that are identified as a hazard is where we're focusing.
That's your first.
That's
okay.
the focus. We, of course, want to continue to improve the canopy as we can, but we have to start somewhere.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Yes, Mrs. McGregor.
What are some of the species you're replacing with? Just out of curiosity.
That is a good question. Our small tree list is our smallest list. I wish I had it in front of me right now because I could read you some, but Japanese tree of lilac is one that is on Taylor Road. Not a perfect option, but flowering stays pretty small. Serviceberry is another one that we consider. There's a couple different smaller maple species. Thank you, Steph.
I just wanted a couple. I was just curious as to, because I know there's what you don't want to plant. I was just curious what you wanted to plant.
Yeah, so we this recommended list that we have that's voted on by the landscape board, the purpose of it is to get away from, oh, you live on such and such a street, you have to plant this tree or these 3 trees. It's, oh, you have a 6-foot tree line, here's 15 species that we can pick from. So it gives us that diversity that we've been talking about to try to protect the canopy from loss in the future. So as many different things that are on our small list as possible. And I know people love to see things that are flowering. There's only so many things that we can look at, but being part of the Columbus Tree Subcommission and then also having a network with the other foresters around, it's made it really nice to be able to look at their lists and copy a little bit, to be honest, but just have those conversations of what new trees are coming out and what new cultivars are working for other people.
Thank you so much for being here tonight. Just one final question. Do you have an estimated timeline for the tree management plan for 2025?
Yeah. So we're with Julie returning from leave. We had a slight break in providing the RFQ. Ultimately, we have to put that out for quotes from companies that would do that work. You're talking about the management plan, right?
I'm sorry. I thought I heard it was going to be done in-house, but
For the pear tree or the pear.
There's 2 different plans.
I'm sorry.
that I referenced. I'm sorry if
Yeah.
I didn't make that clear.
So we
Okay.
there's a pear management plan which will be done in-house.
Okay.
So that'll be that is not the formal plan has not been started yet, frankly. So that'll be 2025. That'll be produced. Separately, there's a overall tree maintenance plan
Yeah.
that Julie started work on before her leave, and we'll be putting together a proposal or a request for proposals from folks to be able to give us a formal quote on that. And then once we have a vendor selected, we'll begin work on that management plan.
I'll note as a component of the management plan, an inventory is part of the request. That's obviously a challenging piece to know where we're starting from in order to progress. So that inventory will be included in the ask or the scope of work for the management plan.
And I'm sorry, is there an anticipated timeline then for that overall management or maintenance plan?
I mean, Julie did some research. I think typical from start to finish is 9 to 12 months, depending on the scope of the work and how extensive, how much inventory is done, depending on how expansive that inventory is. That can be substantial, depending on how broad that is. We would anticipate is that correct in your research?
Yeah, I would expect to have it done in about a year. City of Columbus is just going through, or just finishing up actually, their urban forestry management plan, and theirs is a master plan. Excuse me, I keep like using those interchangeably. Theirs is a true master plan. We're going for a management plan, so that should speed ours along faster. They had a lot of public input with theirs that took them over the course of several years to do that. It's also City of Columbus versus Gahanna, and our estimates are that we have about 6,000 street trees, probably a little less than that now. And to be quite honest, that's pretty small inventory, so hopefully that at least helps move the management plan along so we can get that data back and then start using that to make informed decisions moving forward.
Excellent. We welcome updates on how that process is going. This is something that I think a lot of us see the value and the importance of. It's a really holistic and interdisciplinary benefit to the community. So anything that you're willing to share with us, we would welcome you to continue to keep an open dialogue with council. Mr. Schnetzer had a question?
Yeah, sorry for the late ad here. Thank you all for the update. Obviously, I'll just concur with Mr. Weaver. I've been out knocking doors when maybe they haven't come down while I was at the door, but it was laying in the sidewalk. And so obviously much needed. Ms. Baderi, I know obviously this takes up a lot of your time, but it's not the only thing that you do for the city. And along the lines of what Mr. Renner was talking about with regard to education, if there's anything that's going to go out to the public, I would strongly encourage highlighting the memorial tree program. I've taken advantage of that myself with regard to trying to improve the canopy around here. I think it's a wonderful program, and I don't know how many people take advantage of it, but I would suspect that it's probably not enough. So anyway, if anything's going to go out and it's going to go into the community that talks about trees and the benefits, I think that should be included as just something that we highlight. So thank you.
All right. Thank you so much for the very comprehensive discussion tonight. We really do appreciate it. So thank you. All right. With that, let's move on to section E of the agenda, the consent agenda. Before I entertain a motion to adopt the consent agenda, I'd ask Mr. Clerk to please read ordinance 63-2024 for second reading before we adopt it.
Ordinance 0063-2024, an ordinance authorizing supplemental appropriations, TIF Fund 2240 Contract Services, and Bond Retirement Fund 4310 Professional Services.
Thank you, Mr. Van Meter. I'll also note that while Resolution 39-2024 regarding Native American Heritage Month is on for adoption this evening on the consent agenda, we do not have a presentation this evening. We are still hopeful that we would have a ceremonial presentation at the next regular council meeting. All right, with that, is there a motion to adopt and approve the consent agenda as published on tonight's agenda?
So moved, Madam President.
I have a first by Mr. Schnetzer.
Second.
I have a second by Mr. Renner. Any discussion? Hearing none, Mr. Van Meter, would you please call the roll?
Schnetzer?
Yes.
Renner?
Yes.
Jones?
Yes.
McGregor?
Yes.
Padova?
Yes.
Weaver?
Yes.
Bowers?
Yes. Motion carries. Consent agenda is approved as published. Next section on the agenda, we have one resolution that was not previously introduced at Committee of the Whole, which is why it is on regular agenda this evening. This is Resolution 40-2024, a joint resolution and proclamation to recognize and support National Veterans Day and honor the service and sacrifice of veterans in the city of Gahanna. Is there a first to adopt Resolution 40-2024?
So moved.
I have a first by Mr. Schnetzer,
Second.
a second by Mr. Renner. Any discussion? I'll note that we have been invited to present this resolution at the Veterans Day Memorial event on Monday, November the 11th at 11 a.m. At Veterans Memorial. So if you would please join me and Mayor Jadwin to present this resolution proclamation, we'd love to have you. With that, Mr. Van Meter, would you please call the roll?
Schnetzer,
Yes.
Renner,
Yes.
McGregor,
Yes.
Padova,
Yes.
Weaver,
Yes.
Bowers,
Yes.
Jones.
Yes.
All right, motion carries. That resolution is adopted. Next, Section G, ordinances for introduction and first reading. Mr. Van Meter, would you please read the 4 ordinances identified under Section G of the agenda tonight?
Ordinance 0066-2024, an ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into agreement with Pod Design for Academy Park improvements. Ordinance 0067-2024, an ordinance authorizing the mayor to execute an amended and restated joint self-insurance agreement with Central Ohio Healthcare Consortium and declaring an emergency. Ordinance 0068-2024, an ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into contract with the Board of Health of the Franklin County General Health District, Franklin County Public Health, for 2025 public health services and declaring an emergency. Lastly, Ordinance 0069-2024, an ordinance amending the City of Gahanna Codified Ordinances, Section 505.14, dangerous and vicious animals.
Thank you, Mr. Van Meter. With that, we'll move on to correspondence and actions. Mr. Van Meter, do you have any items tonight?
Nothing this evening.
All right. I have 2 items I wanted to bring forward to council. One is that we've been invited to join in the ribbon cutting for Orthopedic 1 at 605 Crescent Place this coming Thursday, November 7th at 4:30. We do have Jessica Hilt, our management analyst in council office, has prepared a certificate of recognition. Right now, I think it's myself, Mrs. McGregor, and Mrs. Padova that are planning to attend. Is that the extent? Oh, and Mr. Weaver. Okay, great. So the 4 of us do intend to attend that ribbon cutting. The second item I just wanted to share with everyone is that Ohio Women in Government is bringing together a diverse group of women to share their personal journeys to political office. This is going to be hosted on November 21st at the Community Impact Center at 215 North Front Street. I specifically wanted to highlight this because our state senator, Michelle Reynolds, will be on the panel along with State Representative Munira Abdullahi and Reynoldsburg City Council President Meredith Lawson Rowe, along with Anissa Liban, the new Westerville School Board member who's been appointed. And this panel is going to be moderated by Ifra Aliwal, who is the Ohio Women in Government DEI chair. Ifra is a resident of Gahanna and is serving on the steering committee for the strategic plan, as well as serving in volunteer roles with Gahanna Jefferson School District. So I wanted to elevate this to everyone's attention if you are interested in attending that Ohio Women in Government event on November 21st. All right. Anything else from council? Moving on to representatives, Mr. Weaver and Mr. Renner, Community Improvement Corporation.
I have nothing.
Just that our next meeting will be Tuesday, November 19th at 8 a.m. in the committee room.
Thank you, Mr. Weaver. Mr. Weaver, Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission.
Yes, so thank you. As I alluded to earlier, the 2024 MORPC Summit on Sustainability was held last week. Titled Growing Better Together, nearly 700 community leaders and stakeholders from across the region came together to explore innovative sustainability practices and celebrate achievements with the Regional Sustainability Awards. Couple of highlights from the day included plenary discussions. The morning session focused on sustainable growth, economic equity, transportation mobility, and housing diversity across the region. As I alluded to earlier, the keynote address at lunch was by Mr. Jeff Speck, who shared his insights from his book, Walkable City, which highlighted the role of walkable, connected urban spaces in promoting community equity, resilience, and health. And then, of course, Mr. Speck came to Gahanna and offered his comments and perspectives at a wonderful event on Wednesday evening. we're very fortunate to have him join us, and so my kudos to the administration for the get, as they say, so thank you. Also, at the summit, our colleague, Mr. Renner, provided remarks on the core values and practical solutions that the Voinovich School for Leadership and Public Services Masters in Sustainability, Resilience, and Security offers through OU. You're going to have a lot of practice saying your new title when you're finished. And of course, Mayor Jadwin, who serves as the vice chair of MORPC's Sustainability Advisory Committee, offered remarks and participated in presenting awards. Wonderful to see so many of my colleagues, as well as city staff and members of the administration there at the summit on Wednesday. I know Clerk Van Meter and his staff were also present as well, and explored many of the breakout sessions as well. So thank you, and that is all for my MORPC report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Weaver. Ms. Padova, Convention and Visitors Bureau.
Thank you. I hate to be the one to go straight from Halloween into Christmas, but the Holiday Light celebration will be Sunday, November 24th from 3 to 6:30. Volunteers are needed for that, so you can go to the website to volunteer to sign up for that. There's also the Santa race on Saturday, December 7th, and volunteers are needed for that as well. So you can go to visit Gahanna's website to sign up to volunteer and learn more information on how you can help. And before that, enjoy your turkey. That's all for me.
Thank you. Well, I had the holidays lights wrong in my calendar, so I'm glad we updated that tonight. And Ms. Jones, School Board.
Yeah, just one quick congratulations to Gahanna Lincoln High School's TV and documentary series, who had 9 nominations for the 2024 National Student Production Awards, which is essentially the high school Emmys. All of the Lincoln Live recordings, they play every day, but they're also online on Instagram. I encourage everyone to go out and check those out. The students do such amazing work that I really think can be on NBC, CBS, right up there with top-notch journalists. So really proud that we have that program here and that they're being recognized for 9 nominations. So congratulations.
Great. Thank you, Councilwoman Jones. Official reports, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. Last week, we celebrated the graduation of the inaugural class of the Gahanna Citizens Academy. We started with 20, but we had 18 who showed up week after week. 18 residents. They spent 5 weeks with department heads and staff learning about the department operations, engaging in hands-on activity, touring facilities. It really was an opportunity for residents to have access to the behind-the-scenes operation of the city, to see what services are provided, how they're funded, how decisions are made, et cetera. And they were a very engaging group. They were a lot of fun, actually. I'm going to miss being in the room with them. They were quite entertaining as well. But they had overwhelming positive feedback for us. Some of them also asked whether or not we were going to have a level 2 session. So we'll get to work on that one. But right now we are working on a spring session. So we'll open it up to another 20 residents to participate. So information on that will come probably later this year, early at the beginning of the year, as to those details once they're finalized. But there is information on the Citizens Academy that you can find on our website at gahanna.gov. Was going to mention the Jeff Speck event. I know that was already mentioned this evening. Just want to thank all of the residents who attended that event. I think we had 200 people who were registered that night. It was just great to see so many people in the audience, and Mr. Speck was engaging both at the MORPC Summit on Sustainability as well as at that event Wednesday night. He toured Gahanna Tuesday afternoon after speaking at the summit. And then we spent most of the day Wednesday in workshops with him as he was gathering more information on Gahanna. And I know I did see that some people were asking whether or not that had been tape recorded. That was not videotaped, unfortunately, his presentation. However, I know there'll be other opportunities that I'm sure Director Vollmer will be advising us as we continue work on the comprehensive transportation mobility plan. Just a refresher, Gahanna Energy Plus. We had 2 town halls that were held October 22nd. Both were well-attended, one in the afternoon, one in the evening. Great opportunity for residents to ask questions, share details on the program. Those were live streamed and those are recorded. So if you have residents who still have questions about the program, how it works, they can view those on our city's YouTube page. And as I know council was aware, but we also have a very built-out website page that has a lot of FAQs, as well as resource information, numbers to contact if folks have questions about how to opt out, what the rates are, et cetera. Opt-out letters have gone out. I believe they were dated October 17th. So there is a 21-day window to opt out, which would be this Thursday, November 7th. But we all know you can opt out at any time. So keep that in mind as well. In addition to all of the other activities we had last week, last Friday we had our monthly meeting of CAMA, which is the Central Ohio Mayors and Managers Association. And different municipalities will take turns rotating, hosting that. This one was held in Bexley, and we had the unique opportunity to actually meet at the governor's mansion and have lunch with the governor. So it's very rare you get an opportunity to have his ear as city leaders to talk about the issues that are of concern to us. I believe the protection of home rule, the local government fund, local government funding period, just the tax structure for schools and for cities and how that pits us against us and the need to revisit all of that were things that we talked about, as well as infrastructure needs. There's a lot of growth happening in Central Ohio, and I know the governor is very focused on making sure that there's growth all over Ohio. But just because we're doing well here doesn't mean that we don't need help from the state to deal with some of the things that we're dealing with. So it was, again, wonderful to have an opportunity to sit down with him and have that conversation, both he and Fran. She popped her head in and said hello. They were very gracious and lovely hosts, and we were all very appreciative of their time. I know we have our Parks and Recs folk here, so congratulations again on another great Gahanna Goblin Fest. You guys outdo yourself year after year, and I know that all of you get more fun out of just decorating and planning for that event than the kids and parents do walking around. But that was a great evening. The weather was fantastic, and lots of spooky fun happening that evening. Speaking of goblins, pumpkins, I'll segue. I know we're getting ready for Christmas, but we do have pumpkin composting available, as well as political sign recycling. So after tomorrow, if you have those political signs, don't throw them in your trash. There is a bin at Shoal Park. It will be there through the end of the month, November 29th to be specific. So you can take your pumpkins and gourds down. It will direct you as to what goes where, but your political signs can go there as well so that we can get those recycled in a sustainable manner. We've mentioned the Veterans Day ceremony, which is next Monday, 11/11 at 11. It's pretty easy to remember. Gahanna Veterans Committee has put together another wonderful program, and it is always a very moving event. So hopefully we'll see folks next Monday. City Hall is closed that day, and I know council, we meet next Tuesday as well. And then finally, a week from this Friday, the Friday, November 15th, we are partnering again for Breakfast with Columbus Business First. That is something that we've done the last several years. It's really an opportunity to bring business owners, entrepreneurs, leaders in the Central Ohio area together for a networking event. Time to showcase opportunities here in Gahanna. That event runs from, I believe it's 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. at the Menlo, same place we were last week, which is the Peak at Edison on the 3rd floor. It is free to attend, but you do need to register. So if you go to the calendar on gahanna.gov, click on November 15th, it'll take you to a page, and click on that and it'll take you to a page where you get the link to register. So we hope to see everybody there for that event. It is always well attended. In fact, Business First shares that it's usually their best attended of the year. So hopefully we'll see everybody there. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. City Attorney Tim Larison.
Thank you. Just a brief update from me. I did have the opportunity to attend the oral arguments for the Speedway litigation in the 10th District Court of Appeals. For anyone who is interested, they do record those, and they are available on the 10th District YouTube page. But I do think it went well, and so now we are just awaiting a decision on that matter. Thank you.
Thank you, City Attorney. All right, council comment. Councilwoman McGregor.
Nothing tonight, thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman McGregor. Councilwoman Jones.
Just a quick announcement of my October constituent report is live and attached to the agenda, just to see all that we accomplished and what I was up to last month. But that's all this evening.
Great, thank you. Councilman Renner, I want to tee this up a little bit. So I think you've all heard tonight again that Mr. Renner is a student in the Ohio University Master in Sustainability, Security, and Resilience program. He has also, it's my pleasure to share with you that he's also been invited to serve on the regional Central Ohio Climate Action Plan Working Group for Energy and Water Systems. And so I'm really proud of you and really congratulate you for being able to share your expertise regionally in this effort. As part of this effort, it's a collaboration between Sustainable Columbus, MORPC, OSU, our partner, Power Clean Future Ohio, and Impact Ohio. And the team aims to create a unified approach to climate action with an anticipated delivery of a comprehensive climate action plan update in July of 2025. So with that, Mr. Renner, do you want to share with us your more on your goings-on?
Yeah, thank you very much for that. It is a distinct honor to actually be part of the technical working group for specifically for energy and water systems. They do have 4 technical groups. There is one that's focused on transportation, another one commercial businesses and buildings, and another on workforce development. This is going to be very impactful for all our lives because it's a 10-county approach, and you're going to hear a lot more of it later. The central focus is actually making sure that we're continuing on our endeavor to clean up the air. We still have more to go, and also to increase energy efficiency. For housing, how do we actually retrograde a lot of the housing and actually improve the cost of housing? And lead paint is also an exposure problem. There's also, again, everybody knows about the transportation issues. Water and wastewater, it's not talked about enough, but very energy intensive. And so how do we actually crack that nut and try to look for ways to for alternative energy, as well as streamlining the process, and then the workforce development aspect. If anybody knows about the Justice 40 goals by the Biden-Harris administration, definitely go look up the White House. A lot of the goals of this climate action plan are going to actually be mirroring those very noble goals. And so we did meet first time on Wednesday, and we started brainstorming about some of the things, in particular for energy and water systems. There are a lot of cast of characters in this group. Joe Lombardi with SWACO, of course, the City of Columbus, and many others. One of the things that I actually did note is that we don't have enough representation from some of the other counties. And so if anybody knows anybody, please let me know and make sure that we actually get word out, because this is going to affect them as well. Otherwise, I don't think I have anything else to report about that. As Marissa did say, the output is coming in July, so there's going to be 6 months or 7 months of very intense work on this technical working group. So thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Mr. Renner. Ms. Padova.
Thank you. And congratulations, Mr. Renner. I have said here before that you have inspired me to make small changes and making my life slightly more sustainable. So I'm excited for you to have an even larger reach. I'm sure you will make a huge impact. This morning, I was able to go to Gahanna Lincoln High School and talk to some students as they did a mock voting with President Bowers. So my I voted sticker is not really legitimate this evening, but it was very nice. They had everything all set up. They had signs on the walls. You had to get your little number and kind of register, go to your table. And then they had other things for kids to do while they were waiting for the rest of their classmates to finish voting. So I had some good conversations with some of the students who had questions about things like issue 1. And just some of the kids were really excited. Some of them were just, I think, living their life was one of the quotes. But it's always encouraging to hear young people's perspectives. So that was a lot of fun. But that's all for me. I hope everybody goes and votes tomorrow, just like the kids did today. Oh, and you can tune into the Lincoln Live that Councilwoman Jones was talking about at 10 a.m. tomorrow, and they will give you the results of the Gahanna Lincoln vote today. So if you want some pure results tomorrow, you can tune in at 10 a.m. and you will get them. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Councilwoman Padova. Councilman Schnetzer.
Thank you, Madam President. Congrats, Stephen. Just learned about that just now. It's a great deal. The region will benefit from your expertise for sure. Just want to encourage everyone to vote tomorrow if you have not already. Casting your ballot is really, I think, the cornerstone of this grand experiment in representative democracy that we know as America. And also, there's many people across the globe that will give anything to have a say in the direction of their country. I think it's something maybe we take for granted here. In casting your vote, please make an effort to reclaim what I guess I'll refer to as your autonomy of mind. Do your homework on the issues and the candidates and hopefully understand the facts rather than taking someone else's word for it or voting strictly based on the letter after somebody's name. I think that's sometimes how we end up with cartoons for candidates at times. Lastly, despite the prevailing view that this country is divided, please keep in mind that we are all more alike than we are different, and that frankly we're all in this together. In this vein, I'm reminded of the letter that outgoing President George H.W. Bush left for incoming President Clinton, in which he closes out that letter by stating, quote, "You will be our president by the time you read this. Your success is our country's success. I'm rooting hard for you. Good luck," end quote. Again, I just think that encapsulates how even the outgoing president who was defeated by the incoming president at least had the graciousness to understand that, again, we're all in this together. That's it for me.
Thank you, Mr. Schnetzer. Mr. Weaver.
Thank you, Madam President. I'll be very brief. First, congratulations, Mr. Renner. Look forward to your continued leadership on this. Well-deserved. I can't say it any better than Mr. Schnetzer has, but encourage folks to get out and vote if they haven't already. And just a reminder to be patient and be kind to your poll workers. They are volunteers. So thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Again, thank you to Ms. Padova for sharing a little bit about the mock election that was held at the high school today, and thank you to Tiffany Hanna and the other ESS teachers, staff, and students who facilitated that school-wide mock election. We very much appreciated the invitation, and it was a joy to be there for at least a brief period of time today. Councilwoman Jones and I will be attending and hosting a budget and breakfast for all residents to come and meet with us on Friday, November 22nd at 8:15 at Cafe Creekside. I started a budget and breakfast constituent hour to do it annually, try to make it a little bit more fun and casual so we can all have breakfast, fill our stomachs with the great food at Cafe Creekside, talk about the proposed budget, the process, how to get involved, and then just casually hear thoughts and questions from residents about the budget process. So please join us on November 22nd. I very much appreciate Mr. Schnetzer's comments. I just want to echo again how important it is, not just this year, but every year, to make sure that you're exercising your right to vote. And please, please, please be kind to each other tomorrow. Please be kind to our election workers and people who are working at the polls. I'll just very briefly share that my great-grandparents immigrated from Lebanon, and when my grandmother was born, women did not have the right to vote. And the country from which they immigrated did also, I mean, there was no democracy in Lebanon at that time. And so my family came here in pursuit of opportunity, in pursuit of education, in pursuit of career paths. And I think about how my grandmother and my great aunt never missed an election, never missed an election. And so taking our kids with us tomorrow to the polls so that they get that experience to know what it feels like, what it looks like, and how important this process really is. But it doesn't just end at the voting booth. Doing what some residents are doing tonight by coming to council meetings, by getting informed with what your government is doing, with what Mayor Jadwin shared about going to the governor's mansion and advocating on behalf of our community. We're all your friends and neighbors who are regular folks who live here and have decided to get involved in this democratic experiment. So we just encourage folks to not just stop at the voting booth tomorrow, but to find other ways to get involved in your community as well. All right, with that, we will adjourn our regular council meeting and move into Finance Committee. Thank you.
Thumbs up. Okay, with that, let's commence Finance Committee for November 4th, 2024. Again, just a reminder, our approach to the budget this year is a little bit different. Instead of taking a look at the entire budget every single meeting, we're breaking it up piecemeal by departments. And so this evening's focus will largely be focused on the Parks and Recreation budget. I believe a dozen or so questions have been submitted to the administration in advance that will help guide our discussion this evening. But it appears that there is a presentation that is teed up and ready to go. So I assume with that, Director Vollmer, you have the floor.
Thank you. Good evening. Just like last week, we have the same template as last week as well. So the first slide just again shows the general fund expenditures by department, and then next we'll cover the general questions that weren't necessarily related to Parks and Rec. So the first slide is the corrected staffing priority chart. If you remember last week, there was an error in that communication technician 2 for the 2026. We have corrected that. Director Burry and Finance Manager Kincaid are going back through the staffing budget to identify if any others have been double counted, as there's a small error in that staffing module that they use to project salary and benefits. Was there any other questions about that?
Anything
chart?
from council on that one? No? All right, please continue.
Great. The next question was, please be prepared to discuss the training and professional development plan for directors, managers, superintendents, and other key staff members. I talked a little bit about this last week, so I'm just going to briefly go over how HR budgets for the professional development budget for the city. So they do budget all the dollars for the city except for police. Chief Spence and his staff do all the budgeting for police professional development. So each year, HR meets, myself and the HR manager meet with each director. We review the current, what their planned conferences and trainings are for their teams, make recommendations, and then they submit budget requests to HR. HR goes through all those budget requests for professional development to see did they go up, down, did they spend the dollars they asked for the previous year, and then that is what is added to the HR professional development line. So for directors in these level of employees, a lot of our directors are part of national and state organizations. They hold board seats on these. They hold different conference coordinator positions. So they are attending those state and national organizations. In addition, employees have access to city plan training, OSU management advancement programs, called OSU MAPS programs. That's a partnership through MORPSI. They also have access to training through our partners at the City of Columbus. The City of Columbus, as a very large city, has a whole staff that does training for the City of Columbus and other jurisdictions, as we're an enterprise partner with them. In addition, we have Pradco programs such as the Emerging Leader Program that did kick off last week. That's 15 emerging leaders that directors identified in their departments to participate in that program. And there is one of those planned and budgeted for 2025 as well. The requested training coordinator and the staffing budget will assist in developing training plans for key staff members, as a lot of times when you don't have dedicated training staff, that falls to the wayside when all the other compliance and items come up on a daily basis. So if there's any other questions about training and professional development, I'll be happy to answer those.
Anything from council? All right, please continue, Director Vollmer.
The next question is, what is the relationship between the ATP and the Comprehensive Transportation and Mobility Plan? And Director Farrell is going to address that question.
Hello. So the active transportation plan focuses on pedestrian bicycular improvements to help the city of Gahanna be more walkable, more bikeable. The components of that plan will be incorporated into the transportation plan. So, of course, the content and the suggestions or requirements or the recommendations that were derived from the active transportation plan do, in most cases, directly impact that transportation and mobility plan. So having that information prior to will only help to continue to inform and improve that mobility plan.
Council?
And I think the other part of the question was, why are multiple and different consultants being used? And so the active transportation plan was a grant from ODOT, so ODOT actually selected that vendor. These are different plans, so because ODOT selected that vendor, the engineering department ran an RFP process for the Comprehensive Transportation and Mobility Plan. That is why there's a different vendor for that.
Thank you, Director Vollmer. Thank you, Director Farrell. Council, anything to add to that?
I do have a question, and sorry if you just said that. For the active transportation plan, I think it's a little further along than the transportation and mobility one. So just curious when council might get an update of kind of where we are.
Yes, we are in review of the final deliverable. We're looking at the content to make sure the accuracy with the GIS data so that we're able to accurately use the information as we progress with projects. So we're in that final phase of review. We expect to bring that back as an overarching presentation to council to kind of go through the process from start to finish and then also review the deliverable.
Anything further from council?
When would that be? What's the timeline?
We expect to do that in the first quarter of 2025.
Okay, thank you.
And so the next part kicks off the Department of Parks and Recreation. So in 2024, these are some of the top achievements for the Parks and Rec Department. They continue to improve existing park assets, increase participation and expanded opportunities for recreational programming in every division, developed and worked on the active transportation plan, and then Supervisor Perdiri was recognized as a 30 under 30 by the National Recreation and Parks Association and was the only one in the state of Ohio to be recognized for that honor. For 2025 priorities, the department expects to complete the construction of the Price Roadhouse, which will expand access for indoor programming, develop an actionable plan to improve and protect aquatic facilities, and then initiate the first year of the fully comprehensive street tree program that was discussed earlier this evening. The next slides are going to cover the expenditures for Parks and Rec. As a reminder, Parks and Recreation is funded out of the general fund and the special fund for Parks and Recreation. So these first couple slides are the general fund expenditures. One more. And then the next slide is the special fund expenditures. There was a question submitted asking about this chart. So this is the table on page 137. It reflects the appropriation requests for Parks and Recreation Special Revenue Fund compared to the 2024 budget, along with actual expenditures for 22 and 23.
Anything from council on those couple of slides? Ms. Beddoe.
Okay, I'm sorry, can you just repeat that again?
The special revenue chart
Yes.
expenditures?
Yeah.
This is the chart. This is similar to the general fund chart we just showed. This is just the special fund expenditures for Parks and Rec Special Fund.
So,
Because Parks and Recreation is funded out of two different funds, the general fund and this special fund, the Parks and Rec Fund, which is part of the issue 12 money.
So I understand that part, but why is it broken down into so many?
So those are the divisions. So even in the general fund, you'll notice when you're kind of looking at the various sections that are broke out, the way in which you read the account structure. So if you look at that where it says ORG for org, the first 3 numbers represent the fund, which is 242, your special revenue Parks and Recreation Fund. The next 2 numbers, 08, are the department, which is Parks and Rec. So you'll notice when you look at the general fund, it's 10108. So general fund, Parks and Rec Department. And then the last 3 digits are the divisions. So 310 is the Parks Division, 320 is Recreation, 330 is Golf, and so on and so forth. So that's showing for each of their divisions what the budget request is.
Okay, and so you said 310 is Parks, 320 is Rec, 330 is Golf,
We can get you a listing.
and then.
That'd be
okay.
helpful?
That would be lovely, thank you.
Get you a listing.
We'll add the divisions to the
Okay.
book for future releases.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Anything further from council on that? In the last couple of slides that were shown? All right, back to you.
The next slide has the questions, which I just addressed the table on page 137. On page 85, please explain what is the driving increase in contract services. That is for the funding for the 2025 street tree program. That's the increase. And then Director Farrell is going to address the last question.
So our promotional materials, those are for things, the giveaways that we give out, whether, it's a special event or any type of program. The materials are intended to be purposeful or recyclable. A lot of the items are intended to use while you're using park spaces or seed packets so that you can take it home and culture your own plants. They're biodegradable pins, those types of elements in order to just introduce those sustainable elements while they are trying to learn about it or not, just kind of presenting those as items for themselves, for folks to enjoy.
Thank you. Anything from council on those couple of questions? All right, seeing none.
The next 2 slides cover the revenue expected for Parks and Recreation. This first slide is the general fund revenue expectations that were planned for 2025, and the following slide is that for the special fund.
Council, anything on the revenue side?
Is this what is anticipated on page 85, or what's being shown on page 85?
Director Vollmer, are those borrowed from page 85?
Yes, those are.
That's
The special revenue.
fund.
So the general fund is on page 85. The special revenue is on page 136 through 137.
Council, anything to add to that?
Mr. Weaver. Thank you, Chair. So as I read the general fund portions, we're expecting a slight decrease in charges for services.
Correct, and Director
I
Farrell can
comment for
address that.
When we evaluate the programming standpoint, we of course always have to introduce new programming into each year. New programming takes time in order to accomplish the level of what we expect to see. So the projections that we presented are truly what we're seeing. So just being more conservative with the revenue projections.
So if I may, a follow-up, that looks to be trending downward from 23. And is that expected to continue?
That's not necessarily the case. In each of our levels of service, and when I say levels of service, the sections of the divisions, we're actually trending upward in each of those sections. The projection trended downward, but the actual, what we brought in from a charges to services is trending up.
I think that where the disconnect is that maybe that's not what's reflected in the budget book.
Okay.
Director, could could that trend that's being observed in the table on the bottom of page 85 simply be that we're looking at 2024 appropriated, which would have been last year's budget, and not actual
That's
year-to-date?
absolutely possible. Yes, yes. Yeah, the final numbers for 2024, of course, are not included because we're still in the cycle. Yes.
Go ahead.
Just as a follow-up, so kind of, I'm sorry, and maybe you shared this with Mr. Weaver, but where are we anticipated to fall then for 2024 actuals?
Trending up. Again, however, in response to what we identified as a projection for revenue in general recreation itself, we did not meet what we had originally projected. That's why the 2025 projection was right-sized to what we're actually seeing. So the projection in response to the actual, that's why there's a difference there. But in response to what 2023 final to where we're headed in 2024, it is trending in the positive direction.
So, if I may, thank you. Would these numbers then reflect, I'm anticipating they would, adjustments to the cost for services? Or if we've historically charged a fee for a service, but for programming, but this year we're going to offer that as a free program, that would be reflected in these numbers then?
That's correct. And we have a cost recovery model that we use for all of our charges for services. So we have what we charge fits into that model, or we don't present the program. So if it's an item that doesn't meet our mission and is outside of our cost recovery model, then we will not move forward with the program.
So I guess for me, the key takeaway is that participation in programming is up or trending upwards.
Participation, and I will say that the recreation team has put significant effort in expanding opportunities, and that's where the note with new programs aren't always successful in its infancy. It takes time, effort, marketing in order to develop the group, the following that we intend. So we'll continue to expand and continue to work towards gaining that participation, but it does take time.
This is a little more nuanced, but would there be any consideration for programs like CPR training or the new, QPR program to deviate from that cost recovery model?
So because of the intent of that program, it fits within a low or no cost program.
And what about CPR training as well? Same.
Yes.
Okay.
There's a significant community benefit. Anything of significant community benefit has a very low charge for service.
Excellent. Thank you.
There's a table that I know I've seen in my tenure here. Maybe it would help to distribute that via email when you have a chance.
It's something that's reviewed annually, so it'll be as part of a committee of the whole before the end of the year.
Okay, thank you. Anything further from council on those couple of topics?
Just
Mrs.
what
Jones?
page in the budget book did you say this is on?
It's on bottom of 85.
Okay, thank you. Oh, of course, thanks.
Please continue.
The next portion of the presentation is on staffing. So the 2025 staffing requests for Parks and Recreation, they're highlighted on the screen there. There's a forestry foreman, a parks maintenance worker 1, parks manager, and the reclassification of 2 supervisors to 2 superintendents. And then a priority 2 is a second parks maintenance worker in the horticulture and forestry. So the next slide shows the 2025 proposed org chart. There was a question to show the current as well. So on this org chart, you'll see the gold color are the priority 1s, the teal is a priority 2, and the gray are the reclassifications. On the next slide is the current org chart for parks. Those positions in that red box, those, while they look like they don't all directly report to the superintendent, they do. The word foreman here at the city refers to a member of the United Steelworker Union. They are not supervisors, they are lead workers. So they cannot act in a supervisor capacity, which means they can't do job evaluations, they can't issue discipline, they can't really hold people accountable. So right now, as you have these foremen out on site being lead workers. If there's a safety violation, they're calling that Parks and Facilities Superintendent, who's then getting a hold of their HR rep to handle whatever investigation might need done. There are about 22 full-time and part-time people in that red box, and that is not including seasonal staff that we hire during the season. So when you're looking at a span of control, that is a very large span of control when you take into consideration that red box, and then you take along those two other functions of the golf course and forestry. And with some of the new equipment that Forestry Division has received, there are huge safety risks with that and a lot of training component going out with that as well. And then along with the street tree program that's planned for 2025 that Director Farrell and her team talked about earlier today, that is part of the reason why that, if you could go back one, Kevin, to the proposed for 2025, why the staffing recommendation was to reorganize the Parks Department, Parks Division, and add that Parks Manager. Happy to answer any questions on the proposed staffing.
Council, anything with regard to the org chart?
Yeah, so what is direct reports now versus 2025 on that role? Like, I see the picture, but don't quite get the difference in numbers of who will report to the superintendent in 2025.
So in 2025, those 3 superintendents report to the Parks Manager with the admin assistant.
Okay.
So while the Parks and Facilities Superintendent still has what looked like in that red box from the one before, what they don't have now is managing the entire or not managing it because the golf supervisor does it, but now overseeing the operations of the golf and of the forestry side. The Parks and Facilities Superintendent will only oversee parks and facilities, not golf, parks, facilities, and forestry.
Okay, and that does reduce the direct report amount too?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So I understand, I see that. What I'm still confused about is the Parks Manager position. Could you speak more about what that intends to do?
Yep. That would reduce span of control and ensure proper supervision, safety, and oversight, along with managing contracts. The team here talked earlier today about doing an RFP or an RFQ process for that street tree something?
Management plan.
Management plan, great. And so right now, under the current org chart, the Parks and Facilities Superintendent is overseeing that. Kevin, can you go to the next slide, please? Overseeing that, as well as anything that needs to happen at the golf course, as well as anything that's happening in the facilities, as well as anything that's happening in the park operations divisions as well. So under the proposed ones, that Parks Manager is really at a higher level, making sure all of those weekly, monthly, yearly work plans are getting made and then giving down to the superintendents to be executing. It also allows the manager to focus efforts on the budget, implementation of the Parks Master Plan, and overall execution and vision of the Parks Division with the director. I talked a little bit about the work plans. They'll also assist in supporting and identifying capital maintenance programs and assist in the management of those programs. There are some contracts as well that the Parks Manager would assist in managing as well to assist those superintendents.
What does the, how, can you what does the projects manager do that's in the tree underneath the director of parks?
Yep, that position manages the capital improvement projects for the Parks Department, for Parks and Rec.
Okay.
I will note that the capital improvement, there's maintenance programs within the capital improvement plan as well. Those maintenance programs are managed by our Parks and Facilities Superintendent. So on top of the daily, weekly workload, the maintenance programs are also as part of the responsibilities. And it makes sense for that position because in essence, it's the improvement of existing assets. So in order for the individuals who work in the field to identify those needs, it makes sense for that line of work to be part of that span of control.
So currently the Parks and Facilities Superintendent is managing all of the capital and maintenance
That's correct.
projects.
No,
What is
just the maintenance program?
The maintenance program, not the capital improvement projects.
Okay.
On top of the golf course, parks, facilities, and the forestry program and the street tree program. I honestly don't, Mr. Guthrie's still here, right? I honestly don't know how he does all of those things in a 40-hour work week while maintaining the safety, morale. They have a great engagement and morale out there at the Parks Division.
Well, we have a superhuman Parks Department, so, and Recreation Department.
Still means they need to be staffed appropriately according to the staffing study that we did.
So the projects manager, I'm trying to understand the roles of the project manager still. Yeah, thank you.
So on the capital improvement side, just because you see a project in the capital improvement plan doesn't necessarily mean it's being managed by one of two people. It's either being managed by the park superintendent, that would be Zach, or it's being managed by Jim Turner, who's the parks project manager. Think of these things as in scale and size. Jim Turner would manage the larger projects, the Academy Park project, which we'll talk about later, Link to Literacy, Price Roadhouse, the larger projects, what we think of as a project. Zach would more manage the capital maintenance type projects where we're replacing starter blocks at the pool, we're doing the roof, we're doing the deck at the golf course. Some of the things that are smaller in nature but still require management and oversight from his level and or greater. In some instances, Director Farrell is also participating in and managing some of those things as well, right? So she might be in more involved at the beginning stage in the planning and maybe in the design phase of a particular project. So it's really spread, I would say, amongst the three of them, with the director taking maybe the least of the burden of the other two.
Thank you.
Anything further from council regarding the org chart? All right, thank you.
The next slide has the questions. I'm not sure I totally understand this question, so I'll answer it the best that I know how. So the difference in pay between the supervisor classification and the superintendent classification, that is what it is. That is in the 2025 budget. And that's what was reflected on the chart that I showed at the very beginning of the presentation as well. So that's the difference between a supervisor's salary and a superintendent's salary. If there are more questions on that one, I can answer it.
Council? All right, please continue.
And Director Farrell will handle the next two questions.
So the second question in response to beautification, I just want to make note before I go into some of those specific initiatives that a reminder that the horticulture division is part of forestry, and as part of the presentation previous this evening, we have street tree programs, and then we have park trees and horticulture as ultimately two different sections of the division. So keeping that in mind, that horticulture also includes park trees and the care of park trees, as well as other initiatives like managing invasives, vegetation near trails, et cetera. And I'll note that there's an annual initiative to plant at least 100 park trees annually. That has been met since I've been here and since that initiative has been set as a goal. So just understand that that is also part of that horticulture role. But with extension of beautification, adding and improving any type of entryway beds into the community, taking on the service department's contract, that was identified through the staffing study, but not just taking on the contracts, but actually putting some more improved aesthetics to those entryways to really display and be proud of those visuals as people are coming and going throughout the community. Also adding new prairies. We've had the opportunity to expand our prairies as a sustainability effort, so continue to expand and improve those elements as we see fit. We also expect to see some more landscaping as part of the new municipal complex. And then within our own parks, you may have noticed that with the new park signs, we've also been able to develop and improve better plantings within the park entryways as well. So continuing to improve and expand those visuals as well. And then also just taking on more of the work that we right now are done contractually through landscaping. And that in essence just helps for a better quality of work, and it also helps us to reintroduce a more improved and unique bed design for everything that we touch throughout the parks.
Anything from council on those two items?
I left off the second part, and I will reach back to that. So from the Veterans Memorial Park, just this year, there was over $10,000 that was invested into improvements through plantings and addition of irrigation. So we'll continue to put a focus on that improvement. One thing I'll note is that we do have an opportunity in partnership to host the Vietnam Memorial. It's a traveling wall that will be on site. So we, of course, want to make sure that that site is appropriate for the level of participation that we anticipate with that coming to Gahanna.
Thank you. Council, anything further? All right. Thank you.
Last one here. So I think one thing just to note is that there are 3 pillars within Parks and Recreation as a whole. Social equity, health and wellness, and then conservation. So conservation efforts are something that are near and dear and in large part why we exist for communities. So any opportunity that we can have to help and conserve and create sustainable efforts is something that we take effort in. Talked briefly about the prairie land. We have over 14 acres, have a goal to continue to increase that. So it's ultimately taking mowed turf into an improved ecosystem for pollinators and in just essence, a better way rather than mowing down grass, having it as an appropriate ecosystem. Pond management, we have a couple projects in the capital improvement plan. While it may not be very exciting for some, but dredging of a pond is something that's important. It helps the ecosystem and ultimately helps the water quality for our ponds. Developing trails, anytime that we can create those connections. And one effort that we'll continue to do is make trails more appropriate for you to use and also make those connections to locations so that you have somewhere to go. Right now they are majority recreational, but that's because we don't have a lot of those connections that folks may need. So putting an effort throughout the active transportation plan to get people to places. We have a draft land management plan that our Parks and Facilities Superintendent has actually worked with his team. It's been in review through the Natural Resource Advisory Committee as well as the Landscape Board. And that in essence just shows how and why we manage different portions of our parkland, including how we manage invasive species and how and why planting trees is important, just a few things. Recycling efforts, we have received a grant through SWACO for special events. We also now have recycling opportunities at static facilities. Again, the street tree program is in essence, just this year we planted over 350 trees throughout the city of Gahanna, and we'll continue to strive to, the goal is to plant more than is removed. So we'll continue to strive to that. I could go on and on and on, but just some efforts around what and why we do some of the things that we do.
Council, anything on the topic of sustainability for parks? Ms. Bedova.
Thank you. I spoke with you at, what was it, Mill Street Market, I believe, and noticed that you guys were giving away the seed papers as a giveaway, which I love, and that being my former line of work, being very familiar with all of the promotions and giveaways, most of them are not very sustainable. Are you guys consciously trying to like make an effort to make all of them sustainable, or is that something that's top of mind, or is it kind of like we have this one and the rest can be plastic?
We don't have a direct goal to be 100% sustainable. There are certain things that we try to play off of just to help promote some of the activities that we do. But again, anything that we can that makes sense. We don't want to create waste. So the things that we're purchasing are intended to be a purpose and not just left in your car to be thrown away a month later. So, or in my case, 2 years later. So they are purposeful in the purchase.
Okay, thank you.
Anything further from council? I'll just add, thanks for highlighting the trails. I didn't necessarily think of that as a sustainability issue or sustainability matter, but in hindsight, weather permitting, and if I don't have to pick up the kids, I will on occasion ride my bike to work. And, it seems obvious, but I'm not burning gasoline in those cases, and instead maybe burning calories, which unfortunately is a bit of a renewable resource these days. But anyway, thank you for highlighting that. Back to you, Director Bulmer. Or looks like Director Schultz.
My turn.
Yep, all right, you have the floor, man.
So the 2025 capital request for Parks and Recreation, again, just highlighting that you will find this in section 6 of the CIP document. Just a couple of slides that we've actually added based on some additional questions from last week. Sorry, continuing to improve the slide deck here, but what you're looking at here is basically a repeat of some slides that we did a couple weeks ago when we introduced the CIP and then when we introduced the capital budget here. So on the left-hand side, you're looking at all of the different projects that have been completed in 2023 and/or 2024 as it relates to the capital improvement plan itself. I'm not going to go over those in any great detail. I can answer some questions on them if there are some specifics. On the right-hand side, you have a list of all of the in-progress projects. And when I say all, there's one on here, trail repair and maintenance. There's a number of things inside of the CIP. It would have made the slide 2 slides, or trail maintenance and/or repair that are necessary that are in the trail section of the document here. Those are some older things that are still underway, and project manager Jim Turner is still getting his hands around some of those maintenances. But you can see the name of the project, and then next to the name of the project on the right-hand side is where that project is in either design or reprogramming, should be completed by the end of the year. That's what EOY is, end of year. The Hannah Park and Headley Park connector, you remember that we had a feasibility study that Franklin County Engineers Office conducted or is conducting a feasibility study for that connector. So that project is, from our perspective, a little bit on hold while we're waiting for that work to be completed as another example. You'll see property acquisition, more appropriately easement acquisition for the Link to Literacy Trail. The Morse Road Tunnel Drainage Project. Director Farrell will give a wonderful update on that in a couple minutes here, so stay tuned. Price Roadhouse is in pre-bid state. And then Woodside Green Pond rebuild. And then I did actually skip over the Hannah Park Pond rebuild, one of those sustainability issues that Director Farrell just spoke about. But both of those projects are in the design phase and should go into construction in next year in 2025.
Ms. Bowers.
Could you speak a little bit more about the Section 8 Big Walnut Trail, and just where's that living? Who's driving the design? I'm seeing things on Facebook. It seems different from maybe what we've talked about in terms of like tunnels versus over the road. So could you share a little bit more about where we are with that?
Yes. So in 2023, actually, it might have been early this year, we actually expanded the scope of work for a structure point. The identification of an option to realign the trail in order to reduce an at-grade crossing was advantageous so that we weren't crossing an additional slip ramp. So right now, the traffic study is in evaluation with Structure Point in order to determine if that alignment is in fact effective.
Is that being workshopped with BTAC or any other groups?
So anytime that we have a deliverable from Structure Point, we do receive comment from BTAC in order to, and that's actually a large part of why the evaluation is being done, because BTAC presented that the at-grade crossing was of concern, and they wanted the trail to be usable for everybody, including families. And the expectation is that only elite riders would be comfortable on that path. So that's really why the reevaluation of the effort was introduced.
Excellent. Okay, thank you so much.
Council, anything further with regard to the capital projects list here? No?
we'll get into some of the more specifics where we may have some additional questions. So basically, the 2025 capital and CIP identifies $3.3 million to be earmarked for the Parks and Recreation Department. That would be about 15% of the overall capital improvement budget as it relates in total for 2025. So the Parks and Rec CIP is broken up into 4 individual sections. Play elements and surfaces, so those are your jungle gyms and the ground underneath those. Trails and paths, pretty self-explanatory. Park renovations, this is anything that's larger in nature. Last week, I think it was last week, we spent some time talking about Academy Park and a pod redesign there. That would fall under like a park renovation project. Price Roadhouse falls under a park renovation project. And then things related to pool infrastructure. So what you see in this particular chart is the number of projects identified for 2025, about 15. Total investment for 2025 is about that $3.3 million. And then this reallocation, one of the things that we had introduced last week, reallocation of about $4 million. So in the year 2025, we have about $7.3 million that's in play for capital projects as it relates to the Parks and Recreation Department. As you can see, this chart across the top is the fund in which each one of these categories would be pulling money from. So in this instance, we have the majority of money, about $3 million coming from the Capital Investment Fund, and then about $285,000 coming from the TIF fund itself. This does change as years go out, just as a note. These things change as years go out.
So Mr. Schultz, just on that topic of reallocation, you had mentioned the 3.25, and obviously this table shows more than that. So the 3.25, you get there by adding up this year's request from the Capital Improvement Fund as well as the TIF funds, correct? And then the reallocation of monies from a prior year is how we get to this 7.3 million?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. Anything from council on the funding here, the 2025 request for Parks Capital?
Yeah, I think this might tie into one of the next questions about the action park. So we funded.
Well, if you
Just
hold
wait.
that for a moment.
Okay, so there's, just to
There's
clarify
many.
though,
Yes, ma'am.
there's 300 and some $1,000s that are built into somewhere on that reallocation section.
For the Action Sports Park, we're going to get to that.
Okay.
So the first category here is play elements and surfaces. There are 3 projects that are identified. The 2025 ask in total is $210,000. This is for the Academy Park play structure, play and shade structure. There was a previous allocation of about $380,000, or maybe it was closer to $400 for some design work that's been taken out, and then an additional ask for 2025 for $100,000. We're also doing the same thing on the Friendship Park play structure. We're going to allocate $60,000 for the design work around that particular play structure, and then construction monies would be requested in 2026 for the actual construction thereof of said playground. And then the last item on this particular play elements and surfaces is just the annual capital maintenance item of $50,000 to replace a slide that may have broken, things that meet the capital definition that may need replaced on an individual play structure and/or surface itself.
Council, anything on play elements and surfaces?
Just so I'm clear, on the first item on the Academy Park play and shade structures, you mentioned that there was something greater that was actually appropriated in the 2024 budget than the 380 that's being reallocated.
Yes, ma'am.
What was that number?
I don't have that right in front of me.
Well, I guess, so is this number is lower because you've spent some of what was previously appropriated?
Right, so design work would come out of the original appropriation. One of the things that we're looking to do, and as you can kind of see it moving forward there, is the $60,000 ask for Friendship Park, right? That might be a better one to look for. So we would do design in 2025, and then we would plan for construction in 2026. That design gets us good construction estimates, and then therefore a good solid budget for years moving out. Academy Park and some other projects that you see in here are actually handled slightly differently. The old way of doing things, which was to take somewhat of make somewhat of an estimate as to what we thought it was going to cost to replace that playground, ask for that money, return whatever we didn't use, and/or ask for more money if for some reason we were over. In this particular instance, we budgeted too little, and we need to ask for an additional 100 in order to make up the difference there. But moving forward, we would do things more like the way in which Friendship Park is identified on the list there. Design first, estimate, next year allocation request.
So I think I'm hearing you say the things that I want to hear, right? Like, I think that we're on the same page. So like, because I feel some discomfort with this reallocation thing and like feeling like what was maybe over appropriated or overestimated in 2024 that couldn't actually get done. We're now seeing some of that. I'm feeling some discomfort with this reallocation process. And so what it seems to me is like maybe it's different, but we're trying to not do that going forward. We're trying to allocate the funding in the calendar year that we know we're going to spend. Is that right?
To a degree, yes. That's not 100% correct. That might be very nice and neat and easy on a capital project like this. But in other instances, that's not necessarily the case. Equipment is something that is very much variable and doesn't function the way in which you just described. I think in nice, neat, easy little projects like replacing a play structure, I think what you're describing works well, but there are instances where it doesn't work well. We could very well have had all the intentions of designing and constructing, had a good construction estimate, and we still, let's just say we weren't asking for any money in 2025 for the Academy Park play structure, but we didn't necessarily get to be constructing it. Per our procurement policy, we must return that money and re-ask for it. That gives us greater transparency before you folks as to what was spent, why it was spent, how it was spent, and then actually asking for the ask again in the next year.
But I don't feel like that's happening though, right? Like I'm not, I guess I'm unclear on what the total ask was. So now,
Well, I'm not showing what the total ask was. If somebody could pull up what the total ask was, we can identify that, but that's exactly what's happening here. I'm returning the $380,000 and I'm reallocating it in 2025 for 2025. I'm showing it being returned. Basically, when it says reallocation, the mechanism back there is that it was returned at the end of the year, and I'm asking for it in the new year budget. So basically, our capital reserve would go up by that $380,000, but then it would net out to zero because I would be asking for it again to come out of the capital fund.
Yeah, what's happened in the past was that all was done through the PO process. So before our new procurement policy, under our old way of budgeting and handling capital, they would ask for what they needed for the project. It would be stuck on a PO where it may sit for years while they work through design, construction, all the bidding. That would automatically roll over at the end of the year with the associated appropriations. We are stopping that old practice.
okay.
What we're doing now is we're saying, if you don't have all of the steps done in the procurement policy, you cannot stick that money on a PO.
Okay.
So it gets returned to fund balance as unreserved, and then we come back with a better, sometimes right-sized project where maybe we decide we don't really need that much, or maybe in this case, where we looked at it and said, actually, we need $100,000 more.
That's helpful, and I think that clarifies, I think, my first question out of the gate, which was, it sounds like we're trying to do this in a better way.
Correct.
And it sounds like we are.
Yes.
What I would say is we're also transitioning from how we used to do it to this new way. So I think this project in particular is one that's in that transition. So again, going forward, echoing what both Director Burry and Director Schultz have said, it's better governance practices. We're no longer going to continue to hold those money on a PO so that it just rolls over. If your project's not moving forward, you need to return that money. And if the project's going to then move forward the next year, then we'll ask again in that next year, but we're not going to allow that money to just sit there anymore.
Yeah, thank you. This is helpful. I appreciate it.
Yeah, last week, I mean, to go to something you said earlier about, last week, I actually returned $300,000 on the $1 million fiber PO, right? I returned it was a $1 million PO that would end up getting returned at the end of the year because it was unspent, but I was reallocating $700,000 of it, right? So that's hard to show. It's hard to show in a slide like this and then in a chart as we were showing them. But we can maybe.
I mean,
It's only so wide.
Since it is a new process.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think what we've decided is that because some of these do still have the potential of being bid out or being RFP'd out, what more than likely is going to occur is in the first quarter, we'll come with better documentation that shows here's what was requested,
Yeah.
here's what we couldn't move forward on for whatever reason, here's the amount being returned, here's the amount that we're asking to be reallocated in 2025. So we will have that all laid out once we get to that final point where we're able to make sure that, no, we can't award this, we're not going to get this RFP out. It is a new process, so we will just get better as it matures, but there will definitely be a report out that shows budgeted, not awarded, amount that we're asking for, and what that difference may be.
Yeah, I think, I appreciate it. I think that gives a lot of clarity. And I appreciate that there's going to be some growing pains and some transition, and so I know that we're going to kind of experience that. I guess I want to share with you that thank you, because I think that doing it in these smaller sort of segments where it's much more realistic of what's going to be accomplished, I agree. Like, I think we're all sitting here saying the same thing, that this is better governance, that this is more transparent, and so I thank you for making that move, although a little bit of a growing pain during the process. Thank you.
Yep.
I can move on to this question. This is, in essence, asking if we're able to keep up with the playground cycle. So we have 17 playgrounds in our inventory. The expectation is that they are replaced in an 18-year lifespan. So in essence, we have to replace at least one playground a year in order to keep up with that cycle. We do have many playgrounds that were introduced into the inventory in the same year. There's also some that are diverse in the size, which means cost is a little different. So we are and have been able to progress with that one. In some cases, you see two in a year, just based off of where the project falls. But we are continuing to progress with at least one improvement annually to keep up with our cycle.
And those lists are fully outlined in both the Parks Master Plan and in the CIP as well. You would see that cycle and exactly when a play structure is due for removal.
Thank you both. Anything from council on the play elements and services? All right, please continue.
Next section is park renovation and improvements. There are 6 items that are identified, all of which, I'm confident in saying that, all of which are projects that got kicked off here in previous years. The new ask here, or the additional ask in 2025, is for $2.245 million. With a reallocation amount of about $2.3 million. This is the largest section. This would be the section in which you would see, generally speaking, the largest amount of investment being made, I would say year over year in many instances, but especially in 2025. So we have the Price Roadhouse renovations with an additional ask of $565,000. We got some additional questions on Price Roadhouse and Academy coming on in the next couple of slides. So park entryway signs, entrance sign replacement, there's an additional ask for $40,000. While I would say that we're probably going to go to the CIP committee and we're going to ask for the word entrance to be removed from this particular project because this is park signs in general. As a precursor right now, I know that there's a question of all of the entrance signs been replaced, and the answer to that question, the simple answer to that question is yes. But there's a next phase, a phase 3 to that particular project that would get other signs replaced in the parks. And that's a project that the superintendent and some parks from project manager staff are working on, what exactly that plan looks like. There's 2 pond rebuild projects that we've talked about that are in design. I talked about those on one of the first slides there. That's Woodside Green and Hannah Park ponds. And then I will also make a note there, the middle item is a capital maintenance item for park asset repair, replacement, and upgrade. That is a larger number, $250,000, but think of those things as any facility improvements that are necessary at maybe a larger shelter house, as an example, right? HVAC or electrical systems or things that these types of projects would revolve more around structures inside of a park or indoor electrical services, HVAC services, those types of things, which is why that number is greater than the 50,000 that you saw in the last section. If you guys would just bear with me a couple seconds here, I'm going to flip through a couple of other slides. Academy Park, I'll actually go back for a second. Academy Park, one of the things that we're looking to do on Academy Park is actually consolidate it as a project and actually put all of its sub-projects, if you would, under this particular project heading. The next slide here actually identifies all of the different projects that are going on Academy Park, starting largely with the mountain bike trail. I just have that listed here as kind of like a benchmark. There's no additional ask, but I did want to show it. The baseball field fencing, the shelter house and trailhead. Some of these projects Director Farrell talked about last week. Play and shade structures. Please note that this $100,000 ask, yes, you did see it in the other section, but again, we're trying to consolidate this as one project, not multiple projects. And then the Academy Park parking lot replacement project. You will make a note that the year there is 2027. There is no allocation to ask for in 2025, but I will note that is about a $1.8 to $2 million project for the replacement and expansion of the parking lot facility. Again, like Director Farrell said last week, that includes stormwater facilities throughout the parking lot, lighting, and then also the, I think, 85 space expansion of the parking lot itself. So I will pause on Academy Park and take questions there.
And just to add, Kevin, the reason why that's later is because with all of the other projects, there's a likelihood that they'll be tearing that parking lot up just with equipment and traffic and stuff like that, right? So rather than having them drive over a brand new parking lot and risk tearing it up, we'll let them tear the old one up and then.
The only correction I'd make there is that's why the sequencing is what it is. Yes, you're correct. Part of the reason it is moved out to 2027 is also for the proper allocation of fund resources because it is a large ask. When you take the capital, the issued $12 in the capital fund and the revenue that's coming in to potentially put 40 to 50% of the projected revenue into one particular facility, that would strap us to a certain degree. So we are pushing that out for logistical purposes and then also financial resource allocation, which is exactly what the CIP is intended to do.
Thank you, sir. Council, anything with regard to those couple of the slides? Mr. Weaver.
Thank you, Chair. Director Farrell, we spoke last week briefly about Bryn Mawr Park, and I appreciated your willingness to take a look at things. And if you're not prepared this evening, I understand it was not on the list of questions. But if you do have an update, I would appreciate it. If not, I look forward to any follow-up.
I did have a brief conversation, again, with Parks and Facilities Superintendent Guthrie in response to some options, challenges that we discussed in response to where we can properly locate it in order for it to be serviced appropriately. It still remains a challenge. The expectation is people wouldn't want the porta potty on the sidewalk, and that of course is there's a presentation of visual aesthetics, but then also just it's not a great amenity to have in line of sight. So we're going to look through some other options and opportunities that could present to us, but also want to take in consideration any code requirements as well, so that we're compliant with what's expected.
Sure. Thank you, Director. I do appreciate that. And just for the record, I have concerns about using that park or any other park for standing reservations for whether it's soccer practice or other events, what have you, when there's not adequate restroom facilities there. I've heard it several times that people are using people's backyards for restrooms, and
No, and I agree with that. If we're programming a space, we need to have the access to the appropriate facilities in order to program it. So I don't disagree with that.
thank you for taking a look. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Anything further from council?
So there is one question on Academy.
So with Academy Park, we did have some borings that were as part of the project that's incorporated. As expected, we of course have a low water table here, which is going to create some challenges for a functional drainage system. However, there is the request to have a laser grading equipment, and this is, in essence, is a laser technology to help grade the fields to a desirable surface. So this would help to improve that drainage in the sites. That's not just only for Academy Park, but also for our other athletic fields. Synthetic turf is not a priority at the moment. That ultimately just comes down to we have a need to increase our park assets to a typical standard. I would consider synthetic turf to be an elite standard, which we do want to get to that elite standard, but right now we need to manage the improvements to develop the standards, referring back to sites that need the appropriate facilities in order to program them.
Just want to make sure I heard that correctly. Is that laser grading part of the current funding? Obviously, there's a lot of work going on in that park, or would this be something separate down the road?
It's a piece of equipment, actually. So it wouldn't just be used at Academy, it can be used across the platform.
Sure.
That's monies that there's encumbered monies in 2024 that would allow us to purchase that particular piece of equipment this year.
Okay. Anything further from council? All right, please continue.
So the Price Road, there's no added renovations to the project. The funding request is the appropriate ask in order for the project to progress. That includes the building structure as well as the parking lot. This also includes a 20% contingency just because of the volatile construction market. We did go out to bid for this project and we did not receive a viable bid response. So our project manager has worked very diligently in order to right size what we need to do in this position, and then also get the permittings in place in order to make this a more marketable project to bid on.
Council, anything on Price Roadhouse? All right, please continue.
So the OHM contract with the Action Sports Park, OHM will be completing the report for the Action Park. However, a specific location, it will not be referenced within the report. Ultimately, the report will represent the general sizes and expectations from the public input that was received through the process. So it'll provide general sizes as well as cost estimates for those specific amenities. So as we're planning efforts within park locations, we have the information in order to produce those outcomes in different spaces.
Council, anything on the OHM contract? All right, please continue.
Oh, wait, actually, I'm sorry, one
Yeah, Ms.
question on
Bowers.
that. Did scope of work on that contract originally anticipate a site review?
Yes.
Are they going to continue with a site review of any location?
The site review was specific to Lower McCorkle Park. So the evaluation was completed for that site.
So will they be making any recommendations regarding to intensity of use regarding that site at all?
Not for that site, no.
So
They were redirected in order to develop the amenities specific around what size would be appropriate to the population of the city of Gahanna, and then associate cost estimates with that information.
And what, I guess, specifically for a skate park to replace what was at Shull?
Not a like for like. We wanted to evolve, based off of input that we've received, evolve the amenities to be more appropriate for what we're seeing for trends today. And then, of course, we want it to be a project that would sustain, not reduce the participation in a short amount of time.
Will their space and sort of programming estimates allow us to split amenities among various locations?
Yes.
Okay.
That's the thought process, is if we have the information, because we really started with what is an adventure park. That's really where we started. So the work that OHM is doing really helps us to showcase the elements that are important to residents here. That way, when we're introducing new amenities to park spaces, it helps us to inform not only what it is that they're looking for, but also what size it is, what the impact of square footage is, and then also the cost estimate related to that.
And what's the anticipated delivery date?
End of this year.
All right, thank you.
That's the end of this year for the OHM.
For OHM scope of work, that's correct.
Okay, but there could be,
There's more work that needs done after that report comes in to identify the what, and then ultimately the where, if anywhere, right? I mean, depending on what some of those recommendations are and how they would ultimately play out.
Are you requesting any funding related to any projects that would come out of that OHM report?
Not at this time.
Okay, thank you.
I believe, and you can correct me right on the spot here, I believe the $220-ish thousand that was in surplus, because we asked for 300 in 2024. I believe that surplus is going back to the fund, and if for some reason we do need to do additional work in 2025 as it relates to the Action Sports Park and/or an amenity, a single amenity as it relates to that, we would come back before you folks and ask for those funds in supplemental form.
Anything further from council on that item? All right, please continue.
Director Schultz had already commented on the entrance signs that the ask is ultimately to move into the next phase of our park signage. We do have a significant amount that we want to improve our wayfinding and kiosks for this next phase. And then in essence, we want to continue with some interpretive signage, et cetera. So this is something that we'll have to work towards over an annual cycle. So it's something that will be reintroduced each year.
Council, anything on the park signs?
From an athletic field standpoint, oh, I'm sorry.
Is there any thought of like aligning them with the way Metro Park signs are signed for wayfaring, so that it's like a more of a consistent look through, I mean, even though it's not a Metro Parks, but it's consistent signage for trails?
Not with Metro Park specifically, but we are part of the Central Ohio Greenways. And they went through a full evaluation of improvements to wayfinding. And so we are actually utilizing their report to help inform our project. So yes, we want to make sure that people understand that they're on a Central Ohio Greenway and also know that they're in Gahanna. So there's ways that those signs reflect the regional intent, but then also identify that you're on a Gahanna park.
Okay, thanks.
For athletic fields, the overarching Parks Master Plan doesn't reflect on the expansion, but in essence to maximize the use of our existing sports complexes. And again, this is a 10-year plan. So knowing that we have work to do just from deferments and making improvements to our unused, whether it's an unused amenity or outdated, to make those efforts are really where our focus is. With that being said, anytime that there's an opportunity to improve or expand our athletic facilities or increase the amount of athletic space that we have, we of course would take that into account. One specific example is the aquatics master plan that we are working towards now. One of our sites is at the Gahanna swimming pool, which we know that there is some parkland there that has the opportunity to transition to athletic fields. However, we have an aging asset that we need to have a plan for before we move ahead and create any type of design work outside of the aquatic facilities. So I hope that answers that question.
Council, anything further with regard to athletic fields? All right, please continue.
Okay, 2 more categories. We'll probably pick up the pace a little bit here. But trails, paths, and other park surfaces, there's 5 projects identified. An additional ask of $685,000 in 2025 with about a $1.4 million reallocation from prior years. This includes the Big Walnut Trail, the Link to Literacy, and then there's 2 maintenance items on here, asphalt lot maintenance, and then trail and path maintenance. This is one of the things that we have done this year actually, was split out basically parking lot maintenance from trail and path maintenance into 2 different items so that we have some better tracking of individual projects. Tracking of some individual projects. And then the middle project there is the Morse Road multi-use trail, tunnel drainage, and with that, I'll turn that to Director Farrell.
So with the Morse Road project, our project manager identified an opportunity to ultimately build a cross slope within the overlay within the culvert, just to divert water. Right now it just sits, which creates the slipping hazards and just the mess that it creates. So that project had an opportunity to be presented as a change order with the street program. So we're able to progress that in this year's budget. So we're hoping to see that work completed in November.
For the design phase. I'm sorry.
We'll be able to progress the actual, the culvert, the improvement, the overlay within the culvert.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Director, so is that, I guess, what's the location of that particular project? Is that where Big Walnut Trail runs into Morse Road?
It's
Morse Road and 62, the tunnel that goes under Morse up into New Albany.
It's by the roundabout.
Okay. All right, gotcha.
You could tell by Monday's presentation about giving direction about where the soccer field was, that unless I have a map in front of me, giving directions is not my strong suit. So thank you for that pick-me-up.
I'm just trying to figure out where the multi-use trail intersects Morse Road. So, okay. Anything further from council on those items?
So just a note on that particular item, that'll come out in the budget amendment a few weeks from now. So this project will be removed from the 25 ask.
One note that I didn't make was the first question. The $100,000 is not part of the Academy Park project. That is separate from the Academy Park, and that is for any park surface. So whether it be an overlay or any type of improvement with any park surface. So it's separate completely from Academy Park.
Council, any questions?
Is Lower McCorkle parking lot a consideration for resurfacing?
It is still in the CIP as a replacement. So it is not moving ahead in 2025, but it is identified as a need within the CIP.
Okay.
Please continue.
Last section, probably one that caused the most conversation, but pool infrastructure. 2 projects identified for $35,000. I was my sarcasm, I apologize. But the
You
pump
had
room
me
maintenance is
worried.
it.
I was worried there for, I'm like, what are we doing?
Sorry, Ms. Bowers. First item is pump room maintenance. This is just an annual $15,000 allocation to take care of our basically 3 pump rooms, potentially 4 pump rooms if we count the one at Creekside, for annual maintenance and upgrades that are necessary to keep those spaces fresh and new and safe. And then the second item on here is about $20,000 for chairs and shade upgrades, mainly for GSP, but for some also at HRP as well. And with that, I can take questions on pool infrastructure.
Council, anything with regard to pools? Mrs. McGregor.
At the Gahanna swim pool, do they have any plan, are they planting any trees to like, I mean, I know they might be small to start with, but to allow them, rather than always artificial shades? I mean, it's artificial now, but maybe if we planted some trees, then they would, provide shade.
Thankfully, on the Gahanna swimming pool site, we do have quite a bit of significant mature trees there. In response, I can't accurately state if there's a plan to plant more there. I would.
But the trees are like pretty far back from
They
the
are far
pools.
back.
They're not up where like a parent would sit and watch their kids necessarily.
And you're correct. I know that there is a gas line that traverses that property as well, so that creates some challenges
avoid that.
and some other utilities. But as far as any sites that have the opportunity to increase the trees, as Julie presented earlier, we'll take it. But that site specifically, I can't confidently say that is on the plans.
Council, anything further with regard to pools?
Yep.
All right. Director Volmer.
So next Tuesday is the public safety budget discussion. And then, as we discussed earlier at the beginning of these presentations a few weeks back, we would and are expecting final feedback and changes on December 2nd. That will allow Director Burry and her team for incorporation into the December 9th amended budget. So on the 9th, we do plan to present the amended budget, which would include any removals or additions as requested by council. And then that amended budget will have the final adjustments for vote on the 16th.
Thank you. Since that's Tuesday, when do you need the questions for? You still need them on Friday?
Yes, please.
All right. Okay. Council, is this process still preferred path forward? Okay, I see some heads nodding. The administration has asked for questions regarding public service, public safety, 9 a.m. on Friday. It'd be great if I could have, at a minimum, 24 hours to put everything together. Just juggling work and kid sports functions and stuff like that. So Thursday morning, all right? All right. With that, thus concludes finance. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.